Halfland, an ahistorical prehistory. The Battle of the Dunes. In the 134th year of the Common Reckoning, the Orc Scrutter beached his fleet of 7 longships a few miles down the coast from Midhaven, set on pillage and plunder. The Orcs camped overnight by their ships. The following morning they marched inland, across the dunes, heading for the farmland beyond, where they expected to find easy pickings. However, their landing had been observed. There was a notable local landowner named Nicatoris. He sent messengers out into the surrounding countryside, knocking on doors through the night, raising the alarm. All 3 adult Dogopolitan men were eligible for military service, and were expected to own at least basic equipment for this purpose. By morning, Nicatoris had assembled a force of nearly 200 troops. Around 50 of these were heavy infantry, wearing armour, carrying shields, and armed with a sword and heavy javelin. The remainder of the force consisted of light infantry. These troops all wore a sword at their side and carried a shield, but were otherwise unarmoured. Each was either equipped with a sling or clutched a handful of javelins. Nicatoris marched his men to the edge of the farmland, where the ground fell away, overlooking the wind-swept dunes, with their sparse covering of broad-leaved grass, and the sea beyond. He placed all of his javelineers in the front rank. Behind the javelin men was a rank of slingers. The third and final rank consisted of the heavy infantry, with a few slingers interspersed here and there to make up the numbers. Thus disposed, the Dogopolitans awaited the arrival of the Orcs. They did not have to wait long. The Orcs advanced in a column, snaking between the dunes. There were around 250 of them, all armoured, most carrying a shield and sword or axe. A few carried 2-handed axes, but the bills that were so favoured by Orcs were notably absent. After all, when it comes to stowage and potential use in the constricted environment of a longship, relatively compact weapons are preferable to cumbersome and extended polearms. Nicatoris ordered his javelineers to move down the hill to harass the Orcs and break up their formation before it could reach the main Dogopolitan lines. The javelin men moved to their right as they did so, to ensure that the slingers behind them had a clear line of sight to fling slingstones to further disrupt and discomfort the Orcan column. And now the Orcs at the head of that column saw the Dogopolitans facing them, and let loose a belligerent roar, a roar of malevolence and bloodlust. A group of Orcs surged recklessly forward, seeking to bypass the javelineers and charge up the hill and into the main Dogopolitan force. They did not get very far. A hail of slingshot drove them back. But that first group was followed by others, and although the Dogopolitan slingers continued to ply their slings with lethal effect, the Orcs continued to crowd forward, now advancing menacingly toward the Dogopolitan javelineers, hurling abuse as they came. The javelineers did not hurl abuse. They hurled javelins. The Orcs halted, and the javelineers fell back in good order, maintaining their distance. The Orcs massed together, forming a shield wall for protection against the slingstones and javelins that were being continually launched at them, and then they split into 2 groups, one of which charged toward the javelineers, while the second charged toward the main body of the Dogopolitans atop the hill. The javelineers hurled all the javelins remaining to them, but the enraged Orcs were not going to be stopped a second time. Before the javelineers could fall back, the ferocious Orcan warriors fell upon them. The resulting slaughter was brutal. In short order, half of the javelineers were dead. The other group of orcs reached the bottom of the hill, atop which were arrayed the Doggerpolitan slingers and heavy infantry. But the incline slowed the Orcan advance and disrupted their formation. Faced by a snarling pack of murderous orcs, one might have forgiven the slingers if they had run or withdrawn behind the supporting heavy infantry. But Nicatoris steadied them, and on his command they stood in place and rained slingstones down on the orcs advancing up the hill toward them. The orcs never reached the Doggerpolitan lines. They turned and fled. The hand-to-hand combat between the orcs and the Javelineers ebbed to and fro. At times the orcs fell back, and the few surviving Javelineers could regroup. But then the orcs would charge back in, and inevitably more Doggerpolitans would be slain. But the Doggerpolitan ranks still lined the crest of the hill, and their slingstones continued to cause casualties among the orcs. The orcs had expected to kill and plunder defenceless farmers, not to meet this resolute resistance. They slowly started to withdraw, and then turned, reformed into a column, and marched back to their longships. Scrutter was not among them. He lay dead on the sandy soil, felled by a well-directed slingshot. From atop the hill, the Doggerpolitans watched them retreat. Thus did Nicatoris win great renown, protecting Doggerpolitan farmers from Orcan outrages. And thus ended the Battle of the Dunes.